I was standing in the marble-floored lobby of the Riverside Country Club when my hands started to shake. Not from age, I was only 63, but from the weight of the envelope in my purse. The same envelope I'd been carrying for 3 weeks, ever since I discovered what I'd inherited from Mrs. Eleanor Pemberton after 30 years of cleaning her 12-bedroom estate. But that envelope wasn't why I'd driven 4 hours from Pittsburgh to Charleston. I was here because my daughter Sarah had called 2 weeks ago, her voice bright with excitement. "Mom," Marcus proposed, "we're having our engagement party at the Riverside Club. You have to come." What she didn't say on the phone, what she whispered to me in the parking lot 20 minutes ago, her French manicure gripping my arm, was, "Please, Mom, just for today. Don't tell anyone what you used to do for work. Marcus's family is. They're very traditional. Just say you were in hospitality management or something. And maybe don't mention that you're my mom right away. Just let me introduce you as Linda, okay? A family friend." I should have gotten back in my car. I should have driven those 4 hours home. Instead, I smiled and said, "Whatever makes you happy, sweetheart." Now I was here, surrounded by crystal chandeliers and oil paintings of men in hunting jackets, feeling like I was wearing someone else's clothes. Which I was. Actually, Sarah had sent me a Nordstrom gift card last month with a note for the party. "Something nice, Mom." The navy blue dress I wore still had the tags in my bathroom trash can. $240. More than I used to make in a week scrubbing toilets and folding other people's laundry. A waiter passed by, with champagne flutes on a silver tray. He was about my age, maybe younger, with kind eyes that skimmed right past me the way I used to be invisible in the houses I cleaned. I took a glass and held it like a prop, watching Sarah across the room. She was radiant in a white cocktail dress, her dark hair swept up, diamond studs glinting in her ears, the ones I'd bought her for nursing school graduation, before she decided healthcare wasn't sophisticated enough and switched to marketing. Marcus stood beside her, tall and confident in a navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. His hand rested on the small of her back, with the casual ownership of someone who'd never questioned whether he belonged anywhere. Behind them, a banner read, "Celebrating Sarah and Marcus," in gold script. Not Sarah Mitchell, just Sarah, like she'd arrived in this world fully formed, with no last name, no history, no mother who'd raised her alone after her father walked out. Linda, right? I turned to find a woman about my age, perfectly coiffed blonde hair, pearls that looked real. She extended a hand with rings on 3 fingers. "Constance Harrison, Marcus's mother. Sarah's mentioned you're a family friend?" The lie sat bitter on my tongue. "Yes, I've known Sarah since she was born." "How wonderful." Constance's smile didn't reach her eyes as she scanned my dress, my shoes, my clutch purse from Target. "Are you in Charleston? Or did you come from out of town?" "Pittsburgh. I drove down this morning." "Oh, Pittsburgh. I have a cousin there. Where exactly? Shadyside? Squirrel Hill? North Side," I said, naming the neighborhood where I'd lived in the same 2-bedroom apartment for 30 years. Not the Pittsburgh of museums and universities that people like Constance knew. Ah, that one syllable contained everything understanding, dismissal, the slight step backward. "Well, it's lovely you could make it." Sarah seems to have friends from all walks of life. So refreshing, really, in this day and age. She drifted away toward a group of women in designer dresses, and I felt 15 again, standing in the principal's office in my secondhand clothes, while the secretary asked if my mother knew I was there. Back then, I'd wanted to disappear. Now, at 63, I'd thought I'd earned the right to be seen. I looked for Sarah and found her laughing with Marcus's sister, a woman named Ainsley, who Sarah had mentioned was a lawyer at some prestigious firm. Sarah caught my eye for just a moment, and something crossed her face, guilt, worry, before she looked away. The thing was, I understood. I really did. I'd spent 30 years understanding, reading the rooms I cleaned, knowing which families wanted chit-chat and which wanted me to be a ghost. I'd learned to be whatever they needed. Cheerful maid, sympathetic ear, invisible hands that made messes disappear. But this was my daughter. The girl I'd rocked through colicky nights, worked double shifts to put through college, supported when she changed majors 3 times. The daughter who used to brag to her elementary school friends that her mom was the hardest worker she knew. When did I become someone she needed to hide? I moved through the crowd toward the terrace, needing air. The Riverside Country Club was even more beautiful than I'd imagined, not that I'd spent much time imagining country clubs. The view overlooked the Ashley River, sailboats dotting the water like white triangles of paper. The terrace itself was decorated with white roses and hydrangeas, probably costing more than I'd spent on Sarah's entire college wardrobe. "Excuse me, ma'am?" A young waiter, early 20s, held out a tray of hors d'oeuvres, smoked salmon on tiny pieces of toast. "Thank you." I took one, and our eyes met for a second. He had kind eyes too, like the other waiter. He was probably working his way through college, just like I'd worked my way through Sarah's childhood. "You look a little lost," he said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "First time at the club? Is it that obvious?" He grinned. "Only to those of us who work here. Don't worry, the trick is to act like you own the place. That's what they all do." I almost laughed. If he only knew. Because here's what nobody in this room knew. What I'd only discovered 3 weeks ago when Mrs. Pemberton's lawyer called me into his office. The woman I'd worked for since I was 33 years old hadn't just left me a generous pension. She'd left me 30% ownership in this country club. Eleanor Pemberton had been one of the founding members of Riverside back in 1965. When her husband died in 2010, she'd inherited his shares. And when she died last month at 94 years old, her will had specified, "To Linda Mitchell, who gave 30 years of loyal service and genuine companionship, I leave my shares in the Riverside Country Club, valued at approximately $2.3 million, along with my gratitude for treating an old woman with dignity when others saw only her money." The lawyer had to repeat himself twice before I understood. The envelope in my purse contained the paperwork. I was now the second largest shareholder in the place where my daughter was pretending I didn't exist. I hadn't told Sarah. I wasn't sure why. Maybe because the news was still too fresh, too unreal. Maybe because she'd been so stressed about the party, about impressing Marcus's family. Or maybe, and I hated admitting this, because some part of me wanted to see how she'd treat me when she thought I was just her cleaning lady mother. Now I knew. "Ladies and gentlemen," a man's voice boomed across the terrace. Marcus's father, Thornton Harrison, stood at a microphone, his silver hair catching the afternoon light. "If I could have your attention, please." We're about to begin the toasts. People drifted toward the terrace, champagne glasses in hand. I stayed at the edge, trying to be invisible, a skill I'd perfected over 3 decades. "First," Thornton said, his voice carrying that easy authority of men who'd never doubted their place in the world, "Constance and I want to welcome you all to this joyous occasion. When Marcus told us he'd found the one, we were thrilled. When we met Sarah, we understood why." He smiled at my daughter, who beamed back. "Sarah comes from good stock," Thornton continued, and my stomach tightened. Her father's family were attorneys, Stanford educated, I believe. Her mother's side, well, we don't talk much about that. Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. Sarah's smile didn't waver, but her hand on Marcus's arm turned white-knuckled. "But Sarah herself is remarkable," Thornton went on. "Self-made, really. Put herself through college, built a successful career in marketing. She's exactly the kind of woman we hoped Marcus would find ambitious, sophisticated, from the right kind of background." I felt something crack inside my chest. The right kind of background. As if my decades of work, of sacrifice, of keeping our lights on and food on the table counted for nothing. As if Sarah had simply materialized at 18, fully formed, with no mother who'd worked herself to exhaustion to make sure her daughter never had to clean someone else's toilet. Now, Thornton raised his glass. "Let's hear from the happy couple." Marcus took the microphone first, said lovely things about Sarah, about their future, about love and partnership. Then Sarah stood, radiant and poised, and I felt a surge of pride despite everything. She was beautiful, successful, about to marry into a family that could give her everything I never could. "I want to thank you all for being here," Sarah said, her voice steady. "Especially the Harrisons for hosting this beautiful party. Marcus, I love you more than words can say, and I want to thank everyone who supported me getting to this point. Everyone. Not my mother, not even my name. I've worked hard to get where I am today," Sarah continued. "Put myself through school, built my career from the ground up. I'm proud of what I've accomplished on my own. On her own. I set my champagne glass down on the nearest table before I dropped it. On her own. As if I hadn't worked 6 days a week for 18 years. As if I hadn't taken night shifts so I could be home when she left for school in the morning. As if I hadn't skipped meals to afford her cheerleading uniform, her prom dress, her college application fees. To the future!" Sarah raised her glass, and the crowd echoed her. I walked back into the club, past the paintings and the chandeliers, toward the ladies' room. I needed a moment. Just one moment to breathe. The bathroom was as opulent as the rest of the club. Marble counters, fresh flowers, hand towels monogrammed with RCC. I ran cold water over my wrists and stared at my reflection. When had I gotten so old? The woman looking back at me had gray streaking through her brown hair, lines around her eyes, hands that looked every bit of their 63 years, but my eyes were still clear, still strong, and I'd be damned if I'd let my daughter or anyone else make me feel ashamed of what I'd done to survive, to thrive, to raise a good daughter. Except I wasn't sure I had raised a good daughter anymore. The door opened, and 2 women walked in, continuing their conversation. "Seems nice enough," one was saying. "A bit. Common, maybe. But Marcus clearly adores her." "Did you hear about her background?" the other replied. Constance did some digging. The mother was some kind of domestic worker, housekeeper or cleaning lady or something. "No." "Yes. Can you imagine? No wonder Sarah's so tight-lipped about her family. They disappeared into stalls. And I stood frozen at the sink. So Constance had been doing research. Had Sarah known? Is that why she'd ask me not to mention my work? I dried my hands slowly, carefully. Then I opened my purse and took out the envelope. The paper was thick, expensive, the letterhead reading Pemberton and Associates, Estate Law. I'd been carrying it like a talisman, but I'd been afraid to really look at what it meant. Now I pulled out the documents and read them again, slowly. Missus, Pemberton's words in her will. Genuine companionship, dignity, when others saw only her money. Eleanor Pemberton had been brilliant, sharp as a tack until the day she died. She'd seen me, really seen me, in a way I was beginning to realize my own daughter didn't. The women emerged from the stalls, did double takes when they saw me, and hurried out without washing their hands. I almost smiled. I put the papers back in the envelope and returned to the party. The toasts had finished, and people were mingling, eating, drinking. Sarah and Marcus were surrounded by well-wishers. The Harrisons were holding court by the bar. I found Sarah's friend Amy, the one person she'd actually introduced me to by name. "Amy, honey, I need you to do me a favor." 20 minutes later, I was standing on the terrace again, but this time at the microphone. The club manager, Gerald, who'd gone pale when I explained who I was and showed him my documentation, had made the announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have one more surprise speaker this evening. Please welcome Miss Linda Mitchell." The crowd turned toward me with polite confusion. I saw Sarah's face go white. Marcus looked puzzled. The Harrisons exchanged glances. I took a breath and began. "Good evening. I apologize for the interruption, but I realize there's something I need to say. My name is Linda Mitchell, and I'm Sarah's mother." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "I know Sarah introduced me as a family friend tonight, and I understand why. See, I spent the last 30 years working as a housekeeper. I cleaned houses, scrubbed floors, did laundry, cooked meals. I wasn't sophisticated. I wasn't from the right background. I was just a single mother doing whatever it took to raise my daughter. I looked directly at Sarah now, whose eyes were filling with tears. I worked for a woman named Eleanor Pemberton, cleaned her 12-bedroom house twice a week for 3 decades. Mrs. Pemberton was a member here at Riverside, one of the founding members, actually. And when she passed away last month, she left me something unexpected. I pulled the envelope from my purse. She left me her ownership stake in this club, 30%, which makes me, as of 3 weeks ago, the second largest shareholder of the Riverside Country Club. The silence was absolute. You could have heard a champagne bubble pop. Now, I'm not telling you this to embarrass anyone, I continued, though I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some satisfaction in Thornton Harrison's shocked face. I'm telling you this because I want my daughter to know something important. I looked at Sarah, whose tears were now streaming down her face. Sarah, you didn't build your life on your own. You built it on a foundation of love and sacrifice that you seem to have forgotten. I'm proud of who you've become, the education, the career, the woman you are. But if you're ashamed of where you came from, if you're ashamed of me, then I failed somewhere along the way. My voice cracked, but I pushed on. There's no shame in honest work. There's no shame in cleaning houses or serving food or any of the thousands of jobs that people like me do, so that people like you, I gestured to the crowd, can live in clean houses and eat good food and throw parties at places like this. The shame comes from forgetting, from pretending, from thinking that your value comes from your stock portfolio instead of your character. I folded the papers and put them back in my purse. Mrs. Pemberton left me her shares because, in her words, I treated her with dignity. That's all any of us really want, to be seen, to be valued, to be treated with dignity. I gave that to her for 30 years. Tonight, I'm asking my daughter to give that to me. I stepped away from the microphone. The silence lasted another 3 heartbeats, and then Sarah was pushing through the crowd, running toward me. She crashed into my arms like she used to when she was little, sobbing into my shoulder. "Mom," she gasped. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I held her tight, my navy blue dress getting wet with her tears. "I was so stupid," she choked out. I thought if I could just be someone different, someone impressive, then I'd finally be enough. But I was already enough. You made sure I was enough. "Sweetheart," I whispered, stroking her hair. "You were always enough. Always." Marcus approached slowly, uncertainly. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm sorry. I had no idea Sarah felt she needed to." "It's not your fault," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. "But Sarah, if you're going to marry this man, he needs to know all of you, including where you came from, including me." Sarah pulled back, wiping her eyes. "You're right. You're so right." She turned to Marcus, then to his parents, then to the whole assembled crowd. Her voice was shaky but determined. "This is my mom, Linda Mitchell. She worked as a housekeeper for 30 years. She raised me by herself after my dad left. She's the strongest, most incredible woman I know, and I'm ashamed that I let anyone, including myself, make me think otherwise." Constance Harrison looked like she'd swallowed a lemon, but Thornton, to his credit, walked over and extended his hand to me. "Mrs. Mitchell, it appears I owe you an apology as well. That comment about background was inappropriate." "It was ignorant," I corrected gently, shaking his hand. "But we all make mistakes. The question is what we do after." The party resumed slowly, awkwardly, but with a different energy. People approached me, some out of curiosity, some out of genuine interest. The club manager, Gerald, practically genuflected when he brought me a fresh champagne. Amy gave me a fierce hug and whispered, "That was the most badass thing I've ever seen." But the best moment came later, as the sun set over the Ashley River and the party wound down. Sarah sat beside me on the terrace, her head on my shoulder like she used to do when she was small. "Will you forgive me?" she asked quietly. "I already have," I said. "But Sarah, you need to forgive yourself too. And you need to understand something. Your worth isn't in where you came from or where you're going. It's in who you are right now, in this moment. The daughter I raised would never have been ashamed of honest work." "I know," she whispered. "I lost sight of that. I got so caught up in trying to fit in, trying to be what I thought Marcus's family wanted." "And what does Marcus want?" She smiled a little. "He wants me. He told me earlier, after your speech, that he fell in love with the girl who talked about growing up with a single mom, who worked 2 part-time jobs in college, who understood what it meant to work hard. He said he was worried when I started editing those parts out. Smart man. I'm going to make this right, Mom. I promise." "I know you will." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the river turn gold in the sunset. Finally, Sarah said, "So, you own 30% of this club?" "I do." That's incredible. What are you going to do with it?" I thought about it. "Well, first, I'm going to learn what being a shareholder actually means. Then maybe I'll suggest some changes. Better wages for the staff, perhaps. Scholarship programs for employees' kids. Things Mrs. Pemberton would have approved of. She sounds like she was an amazing woman." She was. She saw me, Sarah. Really saw me. Not as the cleaning lady, but as a person. That's a gift I didn't know I needed until I had it. "I see you, Mom," Sarah said fiercely. "I promise I see you. I believe you." As the last guests trickled away and the staff began cleaning up, Marcus found us on the terrace. He'd loosened his tie, and his hair was slightly mussed, less perfect, more human. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, "my parents would like to take you to dinner tomorrow night. If you're staying in Charleston, that is. They want to. Well, they want to get to know you, the real you." I looked at him carefully. "And you? What do you want?" "I want my future mother-in-law to know that I love Sarah for exactly who she is, including the parts of her story that shaped her. I want you to feel welcome in our family. And honestly, I want to hear more about how you managed to raise such an incredible woman while working 6 days a week, because that's the kind of strength and determination I hope our kids inherit someday." "Our kids, grandchildren." I felt Sarah squeeze my hand. "I'd be honored," I said, "but only if we can go somewhere where I can wear comfortable shoes. These heels are killing me." Marcus laughed a real laugh, not the polite chuckle I'd heard him use with his parents' friends. "Deal." Later, after Sarah and Marcus left to have dinner with their friends, after the Harrisons departed with stiff nods in my direction, after the staff finished cleaning and the club grew quiet, I stood alone on the terrace one more time. Gerald approached hesitantly. "Miss Mitchell? I just wanted to say, what you did tonight was extraordinary, and I want you to know that the staff here, we're grateful to have you as a shareholder. Many of us come from similar backgrounds. It's nice to know someone in leadership understands what that's like." "Thank you, Gerald, and thank you for your help tonight." "Of course. Also, I wanted you to know Mrs. Pemberton used to sit right where you're standing. Every Sunday afternoon, she'd have tea on this terrace and watch the river. She said it reminded her that water always finds its way, no matter what obstacles it faces." I smiled. That sounded like Eleanor. After Gerald left, I pulled out my phone and looked at the last text Mrs. Pemberton had sent me 2 days before she passed. "Linda, make sure you read my will carefully. I've left you more than money. I've left you choices. Use them wisely. You've earned every bit of it. E." At the time, I'd thought she meant the pension. Now I understood she'd meant this, the power to choose how I wanted to be seen, how I wanted to live the rest of my life, whether I would continue to be invisible or step into the light. Tonight, I'd chosen the light, not with anger or vengeance, but with dignity, the same dignity I'd brought to 30 years of work, to raising my daughter, to every challenge life had thrown at me. As I drove back to my hotel, a Holiday Inn, not the fancy place Sarah had suggested, I thought about tomorrow's dinner with the Harrisons. It would be awkward. Constance would probably still be cold. But we'd get through it, because Sarah deserved a mother-in-law who tried, and Marcus deserved in-laws who respected his choices. And me? I deserved to take up space in my daughter's life without apologizing for it. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Thank you for tonight, Mom. Thank you for everything. I love you." I texted back. "I love you too, sweetheart. Always have, always will." Then another text came through. This one from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, but curiosity made me open it. "Mrs. Mitchell, this is Thornton Harrison. I wanted to apologize more formally for my comments tonight. Would it be possible to meet for coffee before dinner tomorrow? I have some questions about the club's future direction, and I'd value your input. Thornton." I stared at the message for a long moment, then smiled. Mrs. Pemberton had been right. She'd left me choices, and I was going to use them wisely. I typed back, "Coffee sounds good, but only if you're ready to hear some ideas about staff wages and benefits. Linda." His response came quickly. "I'd expect nothing less. See you at 9 a.m. As I lay in bed that night, I thought about the girl I'd been at Sarah's age, scared, alone, pregnant, working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. I thought about all the houses I'd cleaned, all the invisible years, all the moments I'd wondered if any of it mattered. It had mattered. Every single day had mattered, because it had led me here to a daughter who'd stumbled but was finding her way back, to a future I'd never imagined, to a place at the table I'd earned through 3 decades of showing up, doing the work, treating people with dignity. Mrs. Pemberton used to say, "Linda, remember, the people who look down on you are usually standing on ground you built." Tonight, I'd claimed my ground, and tomorrow, I'd start building something new, not for revenge or validation, but because honest work deserves respect, because single mothers deserve recognition, because every person who cleans houses and serves food and does the invisible work that keeps the world running deserves to be seen. I'd spent 30 years being invisible. The next 30 years? I'd make sure others didn't have to be. That was the real inheritance Mrs. Pemberton had left me. Not just money or shares or power, but the reminder that my worth had never been invisible. It had been there all along, in every floor I scrubbed, and every meal I cooked, and every sacrifice I made for my daughter. I just needed permission to see it myself. And tonight, standing at that microphone, I'd finally given myself that permission. As I drifted off to sleep, I could almost hear Eleanor's voice. "Well done, Linda. Well done."